The last part of Chapter 12 in sports pricing, we're going to talk about some pricing approaches that are specific to sport products, things that are new, things that some research that we talk about, and we mentioned one of them briefly at the beginning of this chapter. PSLs. PSLs, again, as a reminder, PSLs are typically used by sport facilities, historically have been used by sport facilities to help build and renovate facilities. A lot of these funds need to come from somewhere. Many times the sport organizations ask taxpayers to help pay for the facilities through bonds and the like. There's a lot of politics involved in that process, and many of them say, we'll do this if you can guarantee ownership will put some money into it, as well as you're going to limit the amount of involuntary tax. In other words, involuntary tax is when a consumer is taxed without really any right to, without any, they didn't do it on purpose, meaning the things that they do don't impact the tax. They still have to pay it regardless. And so one of those things is, in sports, personal seat licensing, PSLs. That is an example of the opposite, which is a voluntary tax. So voluntary tax is when somebody who's purchasing the product is the one that's paying the tax on it. Because they chose to purchase the product is the reason why they're being taxed, and therefore it's called a voluntary. And so many cities, voters are okay with voluntary taxes because those that use it should be the one paying for it. Many times you see a lot of cities are okay with tourism taxes because it taxes only things that tourists would use, so rental cars or hotels, and those essentially don't affect the local everyday person. And so those are a good example of voluntary taxes. Well, in sports we have a similar, and that again is the personal seat license. This is again started primarily to help build facilities. In 1968, the Cowboys did this. They had two different price points for personal seat licensing. In order to have the right to buy your season ticket, depending on where you sat, you had to pay a flat fee up front, $300 and $1,000. Today, that's closer. Some of the best seats in Dallas at the AT&T Stadium in Arlington are upwards of $10,000 to $15,000 in order to have the right to pay for your season ticket. So this goes above and beyond the price that it costs to be a season ticket holder. College football started to use this in the 1980s. We'll talk about that here in a second. But primarily only used it for tickets that were between the two 40-yard lines, and they were only for donors. So you had to donate a certain amount of money in order to buy the seats in those sections. I'll talk about that in just one second. And then also look at, for example, the Carolina Panthers. They built their $247 million stadium, and one of the biggest uses of PSLs in today's sports, with $90 million from PSLs. And so $90 million of the funds that go to build the facility will be paid for, or were paid for, by season ticket holders. So let's look at per seat contributions. This is what I was just mentioning about college athletic programs. One thing that's unique about college athletics is they fall under the umbrella of the nonprofit status that you would get as a university. And so a donor could donate money to the university for scholarships or for whatever it may be, the general fund, and they can use that as a tax write-off. If, for example, you wanted to buy tickets to a professional sport team, the only way you could write that off on your taxes is if you were using it for business purposes. But you could not write it off as a donation because they're a for-profit business. Well, this is where the loophole comes into play, and in college athletics, since they fall under this element of being nonprofit, they are basically saying that PSLs for college athletics is a donation, and you can write that off on your taxes. And so the way that they frame it is interesting, and that's what I want to show you. This term, per seat license, is synonymous with the word per seat contribution. In other words, now you're contributing, and per seat, you are able to get that seat if you donate the money. Here's an example. This is a few years ago, but Texas A&M, on their court, you can see the different price points. If I wanted to sit on the floor, the ticket price for the season is $550. And you're like, well, that's not bad to sit courtside at a college basketball. $550, I mean, yeah, it's a lot of money, but to be courtside, that's really good. Or floor seats, that is, or courtside, it's the same price. But in order to do that, you have to pay a per seat contribution. This is what I like to term the required donation, which a donation should, in essence, never be required, so to speak. But what they're saying is, well, if you pay us $3,675, well, then you give you the right to pay us another $550 for a total cost of $4,225 for floor seats. You can see as the price goes up, as the price goes down, the seats move further and further away from the court, and so does your per seat contribution. In this circumstance, the A&M Athletics called it a per seat donation. Okay. So how does this pertain to us in marketing? One thing we have to think about is how we go about framing messages. Framing is essentially how you go about putting it in front of the customer. What types of words, what type of tone, what syntax are you trying to imply? In other words, what are the messages you're sending to the customer about your price? So this is a study that I completed about per seat contributions. Essentially, the consumer has been told a lot of different things at different college athletic programs. And by doing research at many of the major leagues, major teams that use per seat contributions, the primary message frames were one of four things. Either they framed it in a way that it was benefiting the student athlete, meaning your donation benefits student athletes. They did it in a way that it's benefiting you personally. The message could have been a combination of both a student athlete benefit and your own personal benefit. And then there are a few college athletic programs out there that simply just said, you owe us this amount of money. Just basically, here's the information on how much it cost. And so if we look at it, these frames were essentially received in different ways. But we summarized it. If, for example, they wanted to focus and say they send a letter to season ticket holders saying you need to renew your seats, but in order to do that, you have to pay a per seat contribution. If it focused on the benefit that was received by the student athlete, it would say something like, your charitable contribution helps the student athlete by providing opportunities for scholarships. So they basically said it in a way that you buy the tickets, you're more likely to help your student athletes. So it's that idea of helping out the university, and that comes from it. The other type were messages that were sent that were simply trying to show you the benefit to you personally, the season ticket holder. So this would be things such as your per seat contribution will give you extra opportunities for better seating for future events and seasons. In addition, it can be used as a tax write-off. Again, nowhere in there did it say the student athlete benefit from it. Essentially, it said, here's why it's good for you to donate money, because we'll give you better seats, postseason, so on and so forth, and you use it as a tax write-off. The third frame was basically a combination of the first two. Your charitable contribution gives you the best seats in the house while helping student athletes scholarships. In addition, it can be used as a tax write-off. So it focuses on both you getting the best seats, you're helping student athletes at the same time, and oh, by the way, you can use it as a tax write-off. And then the last one was the information frame. And like I said, this is simply just a statement of information. In order to purchase your tickets, a $100 fee is required, or X number of dollars is required. We did the study to essentially say, what would consumers think if you sent the different messages? So we did an experimental design that we took 4 different groups and asked them these 4 different frames, and then measured them all on the same scale of likelihood of purchase, satisfaction with the messages being sent, and so on and so forth. And we found that the combination frame was the one that was able to increase post or pre-purchase intentions. And so this is the example is focusing on both the student athlete benefit as well as personal benefit, was able to evoke stronger perceptions of purchase intentions, and therefore would probably be the best frame to use. So if you ever get in a scenario like this, think about how you can use your price to both show benefit to if it's a charitable organization, but also the benefit that goes from being a donor. The last approach that I want to talk about is this idea of price tiers. Price tiers are essentially providing different price points for different market segments. And so consumers in different market segments are able to pay different amounts based on their disposable income. And so price tiers are simply created so that you can bring in different target markets to an event. And price tiers are exactly like they sound. The closer you are to the field of play or the action, so whether it be a court, a field, or an ice rink, or whatever it may be, closer you are, the higher the price goes. We see this as a correlation with our social class systems. This goes all the way back in the history to the Roman times, where higher class citizens sat closer to the field of play. But essentially, what we're looking at here is those that may be more price insensitive and are willing to pay a higher price will be closer to the facility. And for non-sellout games, price-sensitive consumers will purchase the lower price tickets that are in, for lack of a better word, nosebleed seats, the seats that are further away from the facility. So price tiers, again, are focusing on different target markets and different segments. So an example here is I just took a screenshot of the tickets at the ballpark in Arlington, or whatever they call it now, Ameriquest Field. You can see the closer you get to, let's say, home plate seats, individual versus premier ticket prices are a lot higher than if you move your way down to the bleachers, which are much, much lower. So that is chapter 12. Please complete any assignments that are posted.